Hi, I'm Tracy Ackerman, the designer and creator behind Keelyboo. I make patterns, costumes, and accessories for 14 to 20 inch dolls. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you always know when I post new content. Today, we're going to be making steampunk jetpacks for our dolls. I have strap sizing for most 18-inch dolls as well as the Girl for All Time dolls. If you're not already a Keelyboo newsletter subscriber, there'll be a link in the description where you can get signed up so you can get the pattern pieces. Since this is a fairly involved project, I'm going to be splitting it up into several videos. Let's get creating. So here's the Steampunk jetpack I made a couple of years ago, and this is a pretty involved project, so I think that I'm going to do it in two parts because otherwise it's going to be a very long video. So the first thing that I'm going to share with you is what supplies that you're going to need. In order to make these tubes, you can do what I did, which was I found these bubble ones at the dollar store. They came 6 in a pack. They were in the birthday party section. I got them at Dollarama. I think Walmart might also carry these, and I like them because they're rounded on the top, and I just cut these parts off and take the wand out and use them like that. If you can't find these tubes of bubbles and you're looking for something else, you may be able to find something else that'll work in the dollar store. This is a jumbo chalk holder that I found also at Dollarama. It came in a pack of 4, and I think it could easily be converted into a little side tube for the jetpack. I would just cover this portion with some craft foam so it didn't have the holes in it, and once it's painted I'd take the sticker off and paint it, and I think it would be decent. If you're desperate and you can't find anything, a roll like this, which came from aluminum foil, I believe, cut down to size, can work. You're not going to have the dome top, but you can just put a plastic lid over top. Like I tend to save all sorts of funky looking lids, so something like this, once it's painted, could look good. And then you can either paint this, or because it does have these lines in it, you could use aluminum or copper tape, both of which are available in hardware stores or on Amazon. I'll put some links in the description. So there's some ideas of that for you. You're going to need some little plastic bits. So I used a compass ring on this one. So this is actually this compass ring. It's perfect because you can take this plastic piece off, take the little compass piece out, and then I'm going to provide you guys with a gauge, a printable gauge that you can size whatever size you need. So I also got these compass rings at a dollar store. I don't think it was Dollarama. They came in a net bag, and we're going to be painting these and cutting the ring portion off so we can insert it. I'm also going to be using one of these little plastic doohickeys. It came out of an essential oil bottle that I had, so you might be able to find something similar. I know some of the soy sauce containers or other sauce containers have these little inserts that help stop the liquid from coming out too quickly. So have a look around and see what you can find. You can improvise whatever you need to do. These little bits on the bottom here came from either some squeezable yogurt packs or those squeezable fruit packs that kids eat. My son used to eat a lot of them, and I saved them because I thought they looked cool and could make good bottoms for my jet tubes. I've also seen ones that are a little bit different shape that I think could work. So just be creative, have a look around. At the very least, you could put a a cap on the bottom of whatever tube you're using, and just do it that way. You're going to need 2 different sizes of foam for this project. So this is the 6mm size, the thicker foam. It's a 9x12 sheet. 1 sheet will be enough. That's going to form the interior body of the jetpack. And you're also going to need the 2mm size craft foam. This is happens to be a larger sheet, but a 9x12 sheet will be fine. You need to be able to cut a strip that's about 10 inches long off of it, so just make sure that you have one edge that's at least 10 inches long. You're also going to need some leather or vinyl for your straps. I prefer leather because it looks nice on the other side. Sometimes vinyl has that white fabric backing, but up to you. You need a piece that's at least 14.5 inches long by about 2 inches wide, so you can cut the straps out of it. You need a little bit less if you're making this for a Girl for All Time doll. Let's see, what other doodads do I have? I have these little plastic beads that I'm going to be using as dials with a little brad going through. And speaking of brads, you're going to need about 15 of these. I've put them in on these beads to make them look more like knobs, and I've also used them as rivets on parts of the jetpack. If you don't have mini brads or you don't want to use them, you could also use these iron-on nail heads that you can find a bunch of different places. They will need to be glued, not hot fixed though. You're going to need at least 4 rivets to attach your straps together. You're going to need some buckles. Now, I've used this bigger size, and I'll put all the measurements in the description. I've used the bigger size on these. If you are making a jetpack to fit a Girl for All Time doll, you may want to just make your straps a little bit thinner and use these smaller buckles, particularly if you're making the Steampunk Aviator hat. This was the size that I specified in the pattern for it. So if you're already ordering some buckles, just order another one of this size, and you can definitely slim these straps down to fit this size buckle, or you can go ahead and get the bigger size. I think either would work fine for the 18-inch dolls or the Girl for All Time. You're going to need some tiny eyelets. I have used those in a couple of different places where I've got this fake hose going in. 2 there and 1 on the top here. And speaking of that fake hose, this is just weed whacker line. I like it because it's flexible. You can heat this up and shape it however you want, and it just looks like a little hose. Another option might be if you can find some really thick fishing line, you could use that as well. In order to make this little part right here, I just used some plastic that I got from a food tray. I think it was for broccoli or maybe butternut squash noodles. You just need a piece that's about at least 2 inches long and 1 inch high, and a little piece of cardstock, which we will either paint or use some of the metallic tape on to make a nice backing for this little doodad. So in terms of paint and things, I'm going to be using this Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch that works on plastic to paint all of my plastic bits. It's a flat black. I highly recommend getting some paint that sticks to plastic. If you can't find any, you could coat your plastic bits with gesso and then use regular acrylics on top, but it's warm enough here for me to spray paint these items, so that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using 4 different colors of rub and buff, just to show you. I've got Spanish coffee, which is what I did the tubes with. It's sort of a metallic brown. I've got pewter, which is the darker silver color you see in a couple of places. I've got autumn gold, which is actually a copper color that I'm using as an accent, and I've got antique gold that I'm using on the body of the jetpack as well as the lids on the tubes here. For this little bit here, what I had done last time was just mix some green food coloring with some PVA glue and applied that to the inside of this plastic piece. This time I'm going to be trying some Mod Podge with some phthalo green, which is a transparent green paint, and we'll see how that works, but you can definitely use some food coloring in some regular glue. That will work just fine. Speaking of glue, these are the 3 types that I'll be using. I'll be using my hot glue gun whenever possible. I'm using my low temp glue gun with multi-temp glue sticks in it. I've got my Loctite super glue, and I also have some heavy duty contact cement that I may be using in a few places. This is particularly good for sticking pieces of craft foam together. You put it on both sides, allow it to set, and then it forms a pretty unbreakable bond between pieces of foam. For cutting out strips of foam and for cutting my leather, I'm going to be using my metal ruler. You just need some sort of straight edge that you can't cut through. For the leather, I'll be cutting it with my rotary cutter, and I'll be using my blade to cut through for the small strips of foam. I'm going to be punching out or cutting out the holes in the main body that this is going to sit into with my laser cutter. But if you don't have a laser cutter and you need to punch some holes for things to sit in, I recommend this leather punch set. It's got quite a few sizes, so you can select one that's going to work for you to punch out that thick foam. And of course you will need a hammer to go along with this. You're going to need some way to set your rivets. So I've just got this little rivet setter that came with a set of rivets I bought at one time, and again, a hammer. You're going to need some sort of punch. I have my crocodile. I'm going to use this to punch the holes in the leather that the buckles fit into. I'm going to use it to punch the printout that's going to go into my compass ring to form my gauge, and I may use it to punch holes in the craft foam to put the brads in, or I will use my awl. You will need sandpaper or a sanding block or an emery board in order to rough up your plastic and take off some of the seam edges that might be on them so they're flat. So I'm going to be just using this coarse sanding block, and I've also wrapped some sandpaper around this dowel just to get into some of the narrow areas where I might not otherwise be able to sand, and I'm going to be using these to prep the plastic pieces before I paint them. I think I've covered off all the tools and supplies that we're going to need, but in case I've missed something, I will put some link in the description below, a list of all the things that are needed, where you can find them if applicable, and any sizes that you need to consider for buckles and rivets and things like that. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to prep all of our plastic pieces for painting. So I've already dumped out the bubble solution out of these and washed these to take away all the residue. So these little wand things just pop right out, and I'll save those in case I can use them for another project. If the ones you have don't pop out, then just cut them off, or you can leave them because the tubes are going to end up being opaque, so no one's going to see them anyway. I am just going to cut this off, and then I'm going to use my box cutter to carefully take off this remaining bit. Alright, I have managed to cut these down close to the cap, so I'm just going to use my sanding block and sand them down even further. I want to get them as flat as I can. We are going to be covering quite a bit of the surface with these, and we're going to be putting a ring of foam around these, so you actually won't see most of this, but just to make it easier to paint it and get it glued together, I'm going to go ahead and sand this until it is as flush as I can make it. And the other thing that I'm going to do, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but there is a seam that you can see running around these tubes. So I'm going to be trying to sand that smooth, as well as roughing up all of this plastic tube so it accepts the paint a little bit easier. So go ahead and do that, and when I've got that done, I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Alright, so I've flattened out these bottoms as best I could and sanded them down, and I've sanded the tubes so I can't feel a ridge on them anymore. And I've also glued the caps to these because I'm not going to need them to open anymore. Once you're done the sanding, you should give them a wipe with a damp cloth just to get any of the little plastic or residue off. So that'll keep the paint, you don't want that stuck in the paint when you go to paint them. I'm going to go ahead and rough up my little bottoms of my jet tubes here. I'm just going to use my sanding block on all the areas I can get to with it, and I'm going to use my dowel wrapped with sandpaper to get in to the little nooks and crannies that I can't reach with my sanding block. Alright, I've roughed these up pretty well so they'll accept the paint easier, and I've wiped them down with a cloth just to make sure there's no little bits of plastic clinging to them. The other thing that I've done is I've taken apart this compass ring. So it had this on the inside. This plastic bit just comes out. It's not glued in place or anything, or at least mine weren't. I did have to use the blade of my box cutter to just start prying it up, but once it started coming up, I was able to just remove it with my fingers. And this is just a little cardboard piece that I'm going to get rid of, and I'm going to keep this little spinner thing to use as a gauge indicator. So I've cut the bottom off the ring part, and I've left a little bit because I'm going to use that to glue this in place on the Jetpack. And I've also gone and sanded these bits. You don't need to sand this face because you're going to be putting your steampunk gauge in there, but you should sand the inner edges to accept paint so that you can color those, and the sides you don't need to worry about the back. And rough up the little spinner as best you can because we're going to spray paint that too. I've roughed up all my plastic pieces. I'm going to take these out and spray paint them all black, making sure I'm covering them from every angle. And you may have to do more than one coat, that's okay. A few thin coats is better than a thick coat because that takes longer to dry. And you will need to leave these probably overnight is best because it takes a really long time for paint to dry and set up properly on plastic. Our next step is going to be cutting out our foam pieces, and some of those are also going to get painted black. One last thing I did before I'm going to paint is to cut this little spinner that was on the compass down to a single point because that looks more like a gauge needle. So I'm going to do that on this one as well, and then I'm going to go and paint everything. So the first thing you're going to want to do is print out the pattern pieces and cut them out. These are all the leather strap pieces. Once you've got them cut out, you're going to need to attach these two pieces together. So you just need to line up the A's and just use a bit of Scotch tape to tape them together, because this bottom strap is 14.5 inches long, so it didn't all fit on one paper. The other thing you're going to want to do is punch out all the holes at the black circles so that you can mark those places on your straps. Now that I have my pattern pieces prepared, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my straps. If you prefer to trace around them and then cut them out, you can certainly do that. I actually prefer, since I know all of my straps are 1/2 inch wide, I'm going to just cut strips that are 1/2 inch wide off this piece of leather, and then I will cut them down to size, and for the ones that have the rounded ends, I will trace around those. I've already made sure that this edge is straight, so I'm just going to go ahead and, using my see-through ruler, line it up so that I'm going to be cutting 1/2 inch off here. And I'm just going to be using my rotary cutter. So I know that I'm going to need probably 3 of these strips in order to cut all of the straps that I'm going to need. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut 3 separate strips. And once I'm done doing that, I will use the pattern pieces to cut those down to size, cut the various ones. Make sure you have a look. Some of them are a cut 1, and some of the straps, like the shoulder strap, are cut 2. So make sure you're getting 2 of the straps that are marked cut 2. Once you've got your straps all cut and the end shaped, you're going to want to go and mark all of the holes onto the straps. I like to use my chalk pen to do that because it shows up nice and bright on the dark leather. And then go ahead and punch those holes out. I've used my crocodile, but you could use a leather punch as well, just so you can get some nice clean holes. These are going to be used for the pin in the buckle to go through, and some of the other ones are for rivets that will hold the straps together. As we come to the end of part 1, I just want to review what we've done so far. We've gotten all of our plastic pieces ready by cutting off any pieces that we needed to, sanding them, and painting them with some paint that does adhere to plastic. We've printed and cut out our little gauge face for our compass rings. We've gathered all of our tools and little bits that we need for this project. We've printed out and prepared all of the pattern pieces, and we've cut and prepared all of our leather or vinyl strap pieces. So in the next video, we're going to be getting all the foam bits ready and prepped, and then in the last one, I'll be showing you how to assemble everything. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the Steampunk Jetpack series. Since I will be splitting this video up into 3 parts, I'm going to post part 2 next week rather than waiting the 2 weeks that I usually would. So keep an eye out for it. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. And if you like the video, please share it and give it a thumbs up. That really helps me get my videos out to more people. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.